The moment is now, ladies and gentlemen. Republicans are fighting back in force, filing articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. And this is the kind of leadership we need to stand up strong and say, when you fail and you let down this country, we will not sit idly by. Okay, I wish a handful of Republicans, knowing the impeachment will go literally nowhere, filed an impeachment against Joe Biden. And I'm pretty sure it's like, I think maybe the third or fourth time there has been some attempt at impeaching Joe Biden. Just last month, Marjorie Taylor Greene tried doing it. And it's the same thing we saw with Democrats when Trump got elected. There were a handful of Democrats that kept filing articles of impeachment against Trump that didn't go anywhere, that didn't mean anything. And what was the point? Now, I will say there's a big difference. When it came, well, first, both are futile, wasted efforts. I wish I could be as zealous in real life as I was with that opening bit. But the difference is, well, there's a real complaint about Joe Biden's handling of Afghanistan, the border crisis, the economy, COVID, et cetera, et cetera. And people are trying to impeach Donald Trump because like he was racist or something. And just the impeachment filed against Donald Trump was every single time, which I think was 4 times, maybe 5. Man, maybe even 6. It was all bunk. Ukraine Gate was bunk, and they actually impeached him for that. And then they had the insurrection impeachment, and it's just like all of this is nonsense. Ukraine Gate is debunked. Matt Taibbi, look at his reporting. Don't even take it from me. And the January 6th was debunked. The FBI said no evidence. So at the very least, I can't say, okay, some Republicans are standing up, but impeachment at this point means nothing. And we can thank the Democrats for that. It basically is them censuring Joe Biden to the extent the Republicans have any ability to wag their finger at Joe Biden. That's it. Now, the southern border is an absolute crisis. That's true. There are things to be said about the Biden administration's failures, notably the story about the horseback riding Border Patrol agents who were whipping migrants and then they weren't, because it turns out they didn't have whips. And then everyone was like, well, they were lassoing them. And it's like they're just holding the reins of the horse. Well, they're hitting people with the reins. They're not even doing that. Their hands aren't even in the right positions. And then the White House comes out and bans the use of horses. Okay. Well, I can certainly point out that the impeachment is well-meaning but going nowhere. I can point out the fact that Democrats live in a fake world. They live in a world made up of their own delusion. And I don't say that to be mean. You wonder why it is I have my bias. It's because Border Patrol agents did not whip migrants. The White House, hearing they did, then bans the use of horses. That is the perfect example of what's going on with the Democratic Party. They believe clickbait fake news. They're like, these alternative websites must be fake and CNN must be real. It's like, they could both be fake. You know, I've been saying this for some time, too. Just because we know the mainstream media is clickbait, ragebait, trash, doesn't mean that the other side is right either. It just means I don't trust you. And for you, well, we'll see. Now, in my opinion, there is a lot of good reporting coming out of a lot of mainstream sources, so I understand why people would trust it, but you still got to fact check the stuff. One of the things we saw from the mainstream media was that lie where they falsely frame it. White House condemns Border Patrol agents whipping migrants. Sure, I condemn firefighters juggling jars of mayonnaise. As if to imply it actually happened? No. So then when the White House condemns it and the media reports it, instead of putting up the headline saying, no, they weren't whipping migrants, the White House condemns it, they could put something like that, it creates the impression something really happened. Now, I'll tell you what did really happen. They did file impeachment against the president. And I want to come out right away in the intro and say, I put it for you very bluntly in the thumbnail and the title. It's going nowhere. Okay, it's not going to amount to anything. But there is polling data coming out, which is bad news for Joe Biden. You see, if people are these certain individuals in swing states like Ohio are willing to say we'll go as far as to impeach Joe Biden, that says a lot for a swing state. Maybe not that specific district, but I certainly think it's very bad news. And we have polling data to show. I think in Iowa, the Democratic Party is in serious trouble. So that's really what you'll get out of this. Not that anybody should be believing Joe Biden will actually be impeached now, but maybe when the swing hits in 2022, Joe Biden will be impeached, and in my opinion, should be impeached over the Ukraine scandal. Now, I know that stuff all went down before he was president, but I think there should be an investigation into his ties with China, his son's business deals, and we're still in the midst of the laptop scandal. But let's read the news and see what's going on with this investigation. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member. and you'll get access to our wonderful members only section. For now, members will get access to Timcast IRL specific episodes just for members. And we have a few more shows set to launch very soon. We're finishing up the music. And then we're going to have a really awesome mystery show with conversations around tales of intrigue, mystery, true crime, aliens, the paranormal, maybe even Bigfoot once in a while. But you will also be supporting this journalism I'm about to read for you. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, smash that like button, and share this video. Take the URL, post it everywhere on every platform, Minds, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you can. That is how we do marketing. I don't have a big marketing budget. We don't have billboards like CNN. Maybe we'll get them. I think what's better is organic. If you like this video and think it's important and you think the work I do is important, sharing the video makes it happen. Let's read. Representative Bob Gibbs introduces articles of impeachment against President Biden, citing the border crisis. Timcast.com reports Ohio Congressman Bob Gibbs introduced the articles of impeachment, citing Biden's handling of the growing problems on the U.S.-Mexico border, his attempt to expand the eviction moratorium, and his withdrawal of the military from Afghanistan. Now, in my opinion, the eviction moratorium is the overt abuse of power we should focus on, but let's read. Quote, he's not capable of being commander-in-chief, and that's obvious by the action since day one, when he took the presidency back in January, Gibbs told the Washington Examiner. Maybe something like this makes the White House think twice before they do some of this nonsense. He added, I take this seriously. I don't think it's haphazard. I'm not trying to get media attention for myself. He's done so much damage to this country in less than 9 months, which is really scary. The impeachment resolution was co-sponsored by Rep. Andy Biggs of Arizona and Brian Babin and Randy Weber of Texas. This is the second time articles of impeachment have been brought against the current president. Georgia Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene filed the first resolution on Biden's inauguration day, which is just silly. Look, I do think Biden should be impeached because there's a very serious conflict of interest with the things he was doing with his son. And we've only just now gotten mainstream corroboration on the Hunter Biden emails. This is during the Biden presidency. There should be an investigation into that. Quote, we're calling on the relevant committees, just like you had a prosecutor's office and you suspect there's crimes. We want to start building a case, and there may be a case. Representative Warren Davidson, a Republican from Ohio, told the New York Post. A month before this move, Gibbs sent a letter to his fellow House Republicans asking them to consider impeachment. President Biden continues to disregard his constitutional duties and boundaries, he wrote in August. I believe conducting a sober, evidence-based discussion regarding impeachment is warranted. I urge you all to remember our duty to the Constitution and American people to hold this administration accountable. Gibbs opposed both efforts from Democrats to impeach President Donald Trump. And you know what? I agree with that, and I agree with this guy now. The impeachments against Donald Trump were debunked. Ukraine-gate was nonsense. Donald Trump was on the phone with the Ukrainian president and said, you see this video about Joe Biden and getting the prosecutor fired? You should look into that. That's it. And it turns out Joe Biden threatened to withhold aid to Ukraine unless the president fired a prosecutor who was investigating Burisma, a company where his son was on the board of directors. Now, you can say it's not corruption, but you can say at the very least a major conflict of interest for which Donald Trump was right. Let's take a look. It's probable cause, maybe just a conflict of interest, maybe something more corrupt, maybe not. But Donald Trump was impeached for that? They called it abuse of power. Then they impeached him over January 6th. What did we learn? FBI said there was no coordinated plot, didn't happen. The people entered the building, but there was no plan and they had no idea what they were doing. That's from the FBI. And they impeached him for that. Joe Biden has broken the separation of powers 3 times. The first eviction moratorium, the second, and then the Supreme Court said no. And then he went and just violated the Supreme Court. And wow, that's 4 times, actually. Wait a minute. Not to mention the OSHA standards. First, he says, I'm going to implement an eviction moratorium without legislature. Does it? So he bypasses them. The Supreme Court says you can't do this. And then he says, OK, I'll do it again anyway. Once again, bypassing the legislature and the Supreme Court again. And then the the vaccine mandate bypasses legislation, the legislative branch once again. That is overt abuse of power. When the Supreme Court says you're done, you can't do it. And he says, I'll do it anyway. And he's like, yeah, it may be, it might be. We think it's legal. We'll see. Overt abuse of power. Now, as for everything else, impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors, I don't know about that. I think we're talking about Amendment 25 on Joe Biden's incompetence. They say, In a statement on Facebook about the resolution, Gibbs wrote Biden's willful negligence of the border crisis is a failure to maintain and defend American sovereignty. Biden's attempts to extend a federal eviction moratorium despite the Supreme Court's warning and his own admission he has no power to do so is a blatant and intentional action that violates the separation of powers. Gibbs, sir, you are correct. And I agree. There are political dynamics in Congress I recognize will prevent this from ever being debated. But I could not stand by while President Biden commits what I believe to be flagrant and deliberate violations of his oath of office, Gibbs concluded in his statement. Gibbs represents the 7th Congressional District in north central Ohio. I agree, sir. I really do. Now, the central part of there's two big parts to this. One, the separation of powers. I think that is the principal reason for impeachment. However, a big focus is the failure at the border. And I do think we should point out how far Joe Biden is willing to go. First, I'd like to highlight our good friend Kyle Kulinski. I'm not saying it to be overly disparaging. I actually like Kyle. Kyle's a good dude. Kyle tweeted out a series of question marks, confused, because Tulsi Gabbard said, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. The humanitarian and national security crisis on the southern border is the direct result of your open border policy. As I said in my 2020 presidential campaign, we can't have a secure nation if we don't secure our borders. Kyle then shows another image, Al Jazeera Plus. President Biden is using Title 42 to expel asylum seekers without their right to hearings. Trump invoked Title 42, citing COVID-19, but health experts say it has no medical basis. 440,000 people expelled under Title 42 under Trump, 690,000 people expelled under Biden. It would appear that Kyle Kulinski is trying to make the point that how could our borders be open if Joe Biden is deporting so many people? Certainly he's trying to get rid of the migrants. I can explain it very, very simply. First, Kyle, Biden having an insecure border directly correlates with having to deport more people. To put it simply, if you are on a boat and the boat is not leaking, how many pails of water must you bail? Well, the answer is 0. So you would say, Captain John, he bailed no buckets of water, none whatsoever. And then you'd be like, yeah, because his ship wasn't sinking. But Captain Biden has been bailing thousands of buckets of water every day. And you can frame that to be like, why wasn't the previous captain dealing with bailing out the water? And then you're like, look at the underlying condition. The ship wasn't sinking under Captain Trump. Under Captain Biden, the ship is sinking. So he's desperately trying to bail water. To put it simply, Donald Trump deported less people because the border was under control. Donald Trump was building a wall and securing the border, and migrant confrontations were dropping. Now, they did spike to their highest level under Trump. That's true. But Trump quickly got things under control. You can argue about how, why, or what happened, but it did happen. Under Joe Biden, it's been a disaster. It has been a humanitarian crisis going on the entire year. Joe Biden has been removing the border protections, the policies. Now they're banning horses because of fake news. So yes, if water is flooding into your ship, you will need to be bailing out those buckets endlessly. And you can make it look like Joe Biden's working harder than Trump, but the reality is Joe Biden caused the ship to start sinking to the point where we get this. Department of Homeland Security seeks contractor to run migrant detention facility at Gitmo. Guards who speak Haitian Creole. What? This story, what? We were trying to close Gitmo. Now under Biden, the disaster and crisis is so bad that they want to expand Gitmo to be a migrant detention center. Please, left, tell me you don't support this. Joe Biden is a disaster. The border is so insecure, he's like, let's take these people and send them to Guantanamo Bay. This is nightmarish, isn't it? NBC News says the Biden administration is advertising for a new contract to operate a migrant detention facility at the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay. Wow. You ever hear that joke? They say, some guy tweeted this. Waterboarding in Guantanamo Bay sounds really, really fun until you learn what it actually means. It's like waterboarding. You imagine you're on the beach and you're surfing or something, but it actually means a detention facility offshore where people are tortured. And that's what the Biden administration is going to be doing to these migrants. Now, we do have more information coming out that many of these migrants have Chilean and Brazilian IDs, meaning they came from Brazil and Chile, where they lived there long enough to get IDs. So why are they coming to the U.S. border now? Because Joe Biden is sinking America, whether intentionally or due to his incompetence. When he removed the protections that Donald Trump put in place to guard our border, notably the Remain in Mexico policy, I believe the courts reinstated this. When Joe Biden said, we're going to do catch and release, we're going to let people come in, they said, hey, now's our chance. I'd rather be in America than Brazil or Chile. That's what they said. And I'll be honest, I'd almost rather be in Brazil, to be not, but, like vacation wise, I think America's like pretty rad. Appalachia is beautiful. I prefer the climate. But jokingly, Brazil is awesome, and I'd love to vacation there. I've been to Copacabana, in Rio. I've been to Sao Paulo. It's amazing. Never been to Chile, but Chile looks rad too. It is confusing to me that someone would leave the beauty and comfort of Brazil as a refugee to the United States on this long and dangerous journey. Now, I get it. America's great, wealthier. Maybe that's what they're hoping for. But Brazil ain't bad. If you fled Haiti to Brazil, you're doing really, really well. But they come up all the way to the U.S. And Joe Biden has done such a terrible job. This is where we are. So I can respect Gibbs on the impeachment and those who are backing it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, apparently tried to impeach Joe Biden again. And so they said, she filed immediately when he was inaugurated. Now then you have in August, and now you have this other impeachment. This is from Forbes, August 20th, 2021. They say, wow. Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene on Friday introduced 3 impeachment resolutions against Joe Biden that have little chance of advancing. That's true. The resolutions focus on key areas of criticism levied against Biden by GOP lawmakers: the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, illegal immigration through the U.S.-Mexico border, and the unclear constitutionality of Biden's new eviction moratorium. The resolutions are unlikely to go to a floor vote, much less pass in the Democratic-controlled House. Greene, in a statement announcing the resolution, denounced Biden in extreme terms. As with many of Greene's maneuvers, the resolution seemed primarily aimed at boosting her fundraising numbers. That's an opinion. Did you put opinion on this? Is there opinion? Andrew Solender is the writer from Forbes. Andrew, that's an opinion. Saying it seems primarily aimed at boosting fundraising numbers is not a news fact to include in a story. It's an opinion. If a politician or an activist came out and said, we think she's just doing that, then you can report the quotes from other people. But this is what really bothers me about modern news, okay? They just inject their opinions. I don't see this going anywhere. I can give a shout out to Tulsi Gabbard slamming the Biden administration. Haitian migrant crisis, a direct result of your open border policy. This is what we saw in that tweet. But take a look at this. Going back to August, Lindsey Graham repeats impeachment call for former friend Joe Biden. I got to tell you, I think Lindsey Graham is one of the fakest, most duplicitous individuals in the country. He's an awful politician. I don't know how someone like him keeps getting elected. I have no faith in this guy. Not a big fan of him or Mitch McConnell. They say the Republican senator from South Carolina was close to Biden. We get it. He's repeated his call for Joe Biden to be impeached over the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, saying the president ignored sound advice that has been this way for 40 years. Biden rebuffed him, calling him short and not especially sweet. Well, that's just, you know what? I don't like Biden either. I'll tell you this. Okay, in this instance, Graham is correct. Joe Biden should be impeached. Joe Biden is absolutely awful, and I can respect that. But Mitch McConnell comes out September 1st. There isn't going to be an impeachment of Biden. Why did you vote for Mitch McConnell? I know. You're coming out and you're saying, dude, what was that other lady? Was it McGrath who ran against them? It's been a minute. You're like, am I going to vote for her? No, we're going to vote for the Republican, I guess. Primary this guy. I'll tell you what. If there is I voted Republican in 2020, okay? And a straight ticket, by the way. So let me tell the Republican Party this. I do not like you as a party. I do not like most of your members. I like Rand Paul. I like Thomas Massey. Hawley's pretty good because he's addressing social media censorship. And, Ted Cruz is doing all right, but I'm not a big fan of most of these people. Rand Paul, he's I think, one of our best politicians in office right now. Far from perfect, mind you. If you want to convince me, an independent who is actually leaning towards the Mises Caucus and someone like Dave Smith, if you want to convince me to vote Republican, then you better have a powerful primary of people like McConnell. Now, I don't think McConnell is he's not up for re-election for some time now. I'm just saying, if I look to my district and I see some neocon or establishment shill, somebody who sits back and does nothing, I ain't going to be voting for you. And you know what? I'm sure a lot of independents feel the same way. But I tell you this, if there are primaries where you have staunch populist politicians, they're getting my vote. I can see myself voting Republican only under that condition. Because if I'm going to empower the Republican Party, which I do not like, it better be because they're going to do something to protect our rights. And they should impeach Joe Biden. I have personally called for Joe Biden to be impeached over his shady dealings and the revelations coming out because of his son and the laptop and all of that stuff. I think if the Republicans get into the House, they should impeach him, and especially now over violating the separation of powers. Multiple times. I believe we're at 4. But they won't. At least Mitch McConnell won't, and he'll block it. And that says enough. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden has violated the separation of powers on numerous occasions. At the time this statement was made by McConnell that there isn't going to be impeachment of Biden, it shows you how pathetic he is as a man and as a politician. The Democratic Party ripped apart, tore apart the earth, ripped earth from the ground to do everything in their power to destroy Donald Trump. And as much as I think there are plenty of things to criticize Trump over, it was insane to watch the evil and the lies and the manipulations. The Republican Party is so pathetic that they won't do anything to stand up for their positions. You want to see me vote for somebody? Tell me you're going to repeal the NFA. Come out and say we're going to repeal gun laws. They all violate the Constitution and we won't stand for it. Hey, I'm on board with that. You know, if you want to pass a law infringing on someone's rights, you got to change the Constitution first. This is the perfect example of what the Republicans don't do. While Democrats are demanding hard action and change, the Republicans just say, we won't do anything at all. The Republicans defend it by saying, we don't want to use the power of government to force others. Wrong. The Republicans should be then repealing laws. If your position is the government should not use its power, the Republican position should be, we are introducing a bill to repeal another bill. This bill repeals 3 bills. Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell says he will do nothing. And what do we get? The left says that they'll do whatever it takes by any means necessary. Any means. And Mitch McConnell. Here we go. Quote, I think the way these behaviors get adjusted in this country is at the ballot box, said McConnell. The president is not going to be removed from office with a Democratic House and a narrowly Democratic Senate. That's not going to happen. So with respect, he's not saying he'd block it. To correct my earlier assessment, he's saying it won't happen. It's pointless. To be fair, that's true. But my criticism stands. McConnell is a do-nothing. If the Republicans win in the House, that is in line with exactly the logic of Mitch McConnell himself. He says the bottom line is there is no evacuation from the end of a war that you can run without the kind of complexities. Oh, I'm sorry, they're talking about Joe Biden. But let me explain something. When Mitch McConnell said we will not confirm Garland, that was Obama's last judicial Supreme Court nominee. He said it's an election year. It's the last year. We're not going to have a confirmation hearing for Barack Obama's nomination because you don't control the Senate. So we're going to wait. His logic was if the party in Congress deems it so at odds with the president, they reject him. Okay. So then when Donald Trump won, he said, now the Republican Party controls Congress and the presidency, which is unification. So Donald Trump makes the nomination and the Republicans confirm. If they did hold a hearing for Merrick Garland, the Republicans would have just said no, and he would have been denied. So it was a waste of time. Okay. If the Republicans win back the House and the Senate, then Congress, at odds with the president and seeing real concerns, will file impeachment. So to be fair, McConnell is saying so long as the Democrats are running things, there's not going to be an impeachment of Joe Biden, and he's correct. But my criticism overwhelmingly is that Mitch McConnell is a do-nothing. He seems to think that getting judges appointed will do anything. And just realize, my friends, how short-sighted that is. A judge will only rule in the direction that culture allows. Not always. But look at Chauvin. Chauvin did not get a fair trial. I don't care if you like the guy or don't like the guy. The judge admitted it. When they said we want to change a venue, because the people here are biased, the judge said there is no jurisdiction in Minnesota where there could be a trial that wouldn't be biased. So we'll do it here. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but effectively they admitted there would be no fair trial for Chauvin. If that's the case, the whole trial, all of the charges have been dropped immediately or handed over to the feds, which they're doing anyway. Therein lies the big problem we face in this country. Judges are not going to solve your problem. Mitch McConnell seems to think that's the case. The Republican establishment sits on their hands and is unwilling to fight because they're more concerned about what the New York Times thinks of them than their own constituents. And you know what? I don't completely blame them. Most of their constituents learn about them from the New York Times. So what they need is the New York Times to write some article that says, Mitch McConnell is the leader we need. But they're not going to do that. Those days have long since passed. I was mentioning on Timcast IRL that watching The Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy, I think it's from 1996 or something. He's watching TV, and next to his TV is a Rush Limbaugh book. I thought it was really fascinating because, Eddie Murphy's not some right-wing dude, and this is a mainstream Hollywood movie. But they thought it made sense to have a Rush Limbaugh book at this college professor's house in a fictional universe. Nowadays, if someone saw that in a mainstream show, they'd be like, you're dog whistling and trying to promote Rush Limbaugh. You see how times have changed. We need a handle on culture. It needs to be considered unacceptable for a judge to give an unfair trial knowingly. There needs to be widespread uproar, not violence. I'm saying nonviolent civil disobedience against judges who do these things. Imagine if what happened in Minnesota was 10,000 Republicans sitting in the streets around the courthouse, making it impossible to move forward. The courts would be like, we can't do this. And the judge, seeing the reaction from the people, would have had no choice but to back down. Instead, the left went out and violently rioted. Armed police officers and security guards, some police officers with machine guns, had to escort the jury in. That's how insane things are. So you think judges are going to do anything for you? It ain't going to happen. Now, something interesting is happening. Culture is shifting. People are upset with the way things are going. From townhall.com, CNN admits new poll in key battleground state should terrify Joe Biden. They say President Joe Biden has been facing some dismal poll numbers as of late, with some of the latest coming out of Iowa, a key battleground state. According to a Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll released Tuesday, 31% of Iowa adults approve of Biden's job performance, while 62% disapprove. In an analysis of the poll, CNN's Chris Cillizza warned this poll should terrify Democrats ahead of 2022. Also, particularly noteworthy is that former President Donald Trump bested Biden in the poll, as Stephen Gruber Miller mentioned in his poll write-up. Biden's job approval rating is lower than former President Donald Trump's worst showing in the Iowa poll. The former Republican president's worst job approval was 35 in December 2017. Other recent presidents' worst Iowa poll was Obama at 36, George W. Bush 25 in September 2008. The polls showed a lack of support for the president back in June as well, when 43% approved and 52% disapproved. Clearly, September's results show a much more stark difference. Again, 31%, lower than Donald Trump. Iowa is a very important state. It's basically like the state. Now, 2022 ain't 2024. We got several years before we get to that election in 2024, and things can change. It is an eternity until then. It is a year until we get to the midterm elections, and that's still an eternity, though things can change. But it's still really good news in that people are starting to reject the failures of Joe Biden, realizing he offers nothing. Donald Trump may have had problems, but do you miss him yet? At least he was entertaining, right? We have a new survey also from Town Hall. A new survey of key demographics shows stark warning for Democrats ahead of midterms. This one's really interesting. Basically, black voters overwhelmingly reject vaccine mandates, and they're substantially less likely to be vaccinated. According to a new Morning Consult survey conducted September 18th to 20th, the president's net approval rating among unvaccinated black voters tanked 17 points. And that's most black voters. Most of the black community is unvaccinated. I think it's around like 60 to 70%. I think like 65, at least in New York. That means you've got a large portion of individuals who are saying, nuh-uh, you're not going to force me to undergo procedures. And Joe Biden, he said it's because of the Tuskegee Air. He was like, they got a lot of good reason to worry, Tuskegee Airmen and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Joe Biden accidentally called World War II heroes syphilitic victims of government experimentation. There's a big difference between the Tuskegee experiments and the Tuskegee Airmen. Joe Biden, yikes. But the point remains. There's good reason to distrust the government, and we've got to be careful. Some people say I'm too trusting of the government. I look for evidence, and I think you'll need more than just conjecture to convince me that some statement is false or true. Like, you need evidence. If a study comes out, I'm going to say, okay, I take it with a grain of salt. If a study comes out, there's a lot of studies of, different. We'll keep the vaccine stuff out of it, but there's conflicting studies. I won't blindly believe any of them. I'll just do my best to navigate this stuff and talk to experts and people I trust to figure out what's right and what's wrong. But you've got people who blindly believe government and people who blindly distrust. Well, I shouldn't say blindly distrust, who distrust government, but then that leads them into the hands of people that they shouldn't necessarily trust. Anyway, I digress. When it comes to government trust, overwhelmingly white progressives trust the government, but the black voters don't. So that's going to be really, really bad for Joe Biden as he makes the authoritarian push, violates his oath of office, and abuses his powers. Eventually, you're going to get people saying, we don't stand for this. And maybe we'll see something happen in 2022. With the way California looked in the recall election, I wouldn't hold my breath. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. tonight at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all then.